Reverse by Black K. Cat. Chapter 61. Paranesis. Fucking damn it! Genma huffs, bracing himself against the trunk of a tree. His back is on fire, and they're not out of the woods yet. Literally, in this case. There's still a good stretch of forest left between them and the village, and squads of hostile shinobi excelling in stealth and tracking on their tails. At least the kids have decent training. Genma can't imagine doing this with two civilian kids. As if hearing his thoughts, Shin offers quietly, "I can go scout." "Or I can," Sai adds immediately, then pauses. A brief hesitation, and he bites his lip. It's definitely more emotion than he's supposed to show, and Genma is unspeakably grateful for it. "My ink animals might be noticed, though. Just so someone knows what I can do." "Better not risk it either way," Genma tells him, trying to make his tone comforting. It's harder from behind an Anbu mask, but he can't chance Danzo figuring out who he is. That's probably the only hope these kids have of actually staying free, if he can just get them into the village without being followed. A blur of movement, and with the darkness, the lack of moonlight, the heavy shadows, anyone else would probably miss it. Genma was Namikaze Minato's bodyguard from the time he was 14, though, and he sparred with the man more than enough to hone his reflexes beyond what most shinobi can manage. He spins in front of the boys, Senbon already halfway to their destination, and doesn't allow himself to hesitate even when the attacker dodges. The woman steps right into the path of the second handful he threw a split second after the first, and collapses with long needles in most of her vitals. "You're very good," Sai says in something close to awe. "Way too much practice." Genma tips one shoulder in half a shrug, though most of his attention is on the area around them. If any more rude shinobi are waiting, though, they're better at hiding than he is at finding them. "Come on, this way." From here it's a short run to the Forest of Death, which most shinobi avoid whenever possible. Heading that way might throw their pursuers off their trail, and Genma trained there enough times with Kushina and later Anko that he isn't too worried about navigating it, even at night. "You guys ever use the standard training grounds?" he asks. Shin shakes his head, following barely 2 feet behind him, with Sai's hand still in his grip. "Lord Danzo prefers us to use the grounds under the mountain." Of course, because if they didn't, someone might catch a glimpse of them and start asking questions, and what a tragedy that would be. Genma firmly stomps on his urge to say so because it's not helpful, and nods. "Then stay close. We need to move fast." A faint buzz sounds low and heavy in the darkness. In summer, Genma probably wouldn't even think about it, but it's the dead of winter right now. The only insects are... "No!" he hisses, and it's a dumb thing to do, but he grabs for an exploding tag. Grabbing Shin, he drags him closer to hiss and address in his ear, then orders, "Go! Get there as fast as possible! I'll hold him off!" Shin doesn't waste time arguing, though Sai's eyes are wide, and he looks ready to protest. Still hanging on to him, the older boy takes off at a flat run, disappearing into the trees as Genma throws the tag and dives to the side. It detonates, and the Kikaichi are blasted away in a surge of bright flame. "Damn it, how the heck did Danzo get his hands on clan children?" The explosion is more than enough to give his location away, so Genma turns and heads the opposite direction of the boys, dodging a flight of shuriken and leaping out of the way of a futon jutsu. A flash of movement, and he spins a single senbon driving into the shinobi's neck, but the pause lets the others catch up to him. 2 men, 2 women, and 1 kid with a full face cloth mask and spiky black hair, almost definitely an abarame. "Don't suppose you guys would be interested in talking this out?" Genma asks slightly, eyeing the 5 of them. But he wishes he could use the Hiraishin on his own right now. That would solve a heck of a lot of problems. But unlike Minato, all he's got going for him is his aim. A paralysis jutsu crackles through the air, and Genma leaps over it, flipping and coming down hard on top of the man who used it. He ducks a stab with a kunai, slams an elbow into the man's kidney, and while he's wheezing, drives a senbon through his throat. The root agent goes down, but Genma grabs him before he can hit the ground and turns, jerking his body up like a shield. 3 shurikens slam into it, and Genma lets go, leaping up and over. He slams feet first into the woman who threw them, bowling her over, but before he can get a senbon in her vitals, the second woman hisses at another wind jutsu. No time or space to dodge, so Genma goes right through it, feeling cloth rip and armor dent, the skin beneath splitting. She counters his punch, spins to throw an elbow at his throat, but Genma ducks down to let it glance off the side of his mask and uses the opening to flick a kunai at her bare shoulder. It sinks deep, and barely a second later she collapses. The first woman is just climbing to her feet, wiping a few splatters of Genma's blood off her skin, and the second man steps up to join her. Genma retreats another step, most of his attention on them, and a good portion on the kid as well. He hasn't moved, is still hanging back in the shadows, and Genma can't quite decide whether that's hesitance or if he's being held in reserve for some kind of last-ditch attack. "I guess that's a no to talking," he says lightly, palming the last of his paralyzing senbon in his left hand and 3 more of the deadly ones in his right. He doesn't want to kill the kid if he doesn't have to. The older shinobi have definitely been through Danzo's training already, but the boy can't be much older than Shin and Sai, so there's a chance of getting through to him still. "You are ordered to surrender," the woman says, drawing her tanto. "You are outnumbered and trapped. Give up. You are accused of treason against Kanahagakare." Well, if they wanted to find the magic words to make Genma lose his temper, those ones are a pretty good bet. Genma doesn't get angry easily, hasn't lost his composure since the day his sister's squad had their movements betrayed by a fellow Konoha shinobi and were killed by Kumo Nin. But being called a traitor by the very proof that Danzo has betrayed everything Konoha stands for? Yeah, Genma's not overly happy about that. "Sorry," Genma tells her and keeps it cheerful, just a little bit dry. "I'd love to come with you and get disappeared for all eternity, but I kind of took responsibility for those kids. Can't let them go hungry and all that now." There's a pause, like the woman is trying to work out whether he's serious. "The trainees will be returned and reconditioned," she says after several seconds. "Not," Genma says, losing a good portion of his humor, "ever going to happen. They were supposed to try and kill each other. They're friends. Anyone who'd make friends murder each other is the worst kind of scum." The Abarame boy stiffens just enough for it to be noticeable. "En route, you have no name, you have no feelings, you have no past, you have no future. There is only the missions," the woman repeats like it's rote. Genma flips a senbon through the fingers of his left hand, showy and distracting. Then Danzo's taken away all the meaning behind being a Konoha shinobi, he tells her. "I'm going to regret killing you before you find out what it's really supposed to be." It's true, not just bravado. Genma regrets a lot of the kills he's made, whether they were other shinobi like in the war or civilian targets on missions, and he'll likely regret this one more than most. It's never stopped him before though, and it won't make him hesitate now. Right and wrong are big concepts and a little too complex for a simple guy like him, but Genma's got the "my village" and "not my village" parts down pretty well. Root might have been founded by Danzo, but they're not working for Konoha in any way that matters. That makes them enemies, and enemies have to be dealt with in any way possible. Besides, these guys are good. If he's going to make it back to explain to Raido why they suddenly have 2 kids staying in their apartment, he's going to have to be ruthless. It's not the woman who makes the first move, it's the man who goes low and comes up with a fire jutsu shaped like a dragon. Genma curses, throwing himself backwards and out of its path even as he feels the heat scorch his mask. He rolls, twisting to his feet the second he's clear, and knocks the woman's tanto to the side with his bracer. She recovers instantly, stabbing up like she's going to gut him, but Genma gets one hand on her wrist and kicks off, flipping up and over her head. As he comes down, he knees her hard in the back, throwing her off balance, and shoves a senbon into the pressure point on her neck. She dies without a sound, but right now Genma doesn't have time for the regret he promised her. That's for later, when he has the luxury for it. The man whirls in, another fire jutsu twisting from his fingers, but Genma's had enough. He flashes through hand signs and takes it back, returning the surge of flame with a stronger one that scorches flesh and makes the man cry out. Ducking under his guard, Genma shifts out of the way of a kick, dislocates his knee with a hard blow from his elbow, and brings the heel of his hand up hard as the attacker falls. His neck breaks with a dull crack, and Genma lets him crumple as he comes smoothly to his feet. The boy has one glove off and is just making to remove the other. "Don't!" Genma tells him, fingers closing a little more firmly around the paralyzing senbon in his hand. "It doesn't have to go this way." The kid's eyes are completely covered, no hint to his expression showing there, but his mouth pulls just a little tight in clear hesitance. "You ever met Sai and Shin?" Genma asks, keeping his tone light. Another long pause before the kid nods once, sharp and wary. "I thought so. Trainees have to stick together, right?" One half step forward, and when the boy doesn't move, Genma allows himself a faint flicker of hope. "Fu and Shin are friends," the boy says slowly. "They play shogi. Strategy games are encouraged." Genma's first thought upon hearing that name is the little Jinchuriki girl who's pretty much always clinging to Kurama's back, and gods, but he can't even imagine what Kurama would say in that situation. Or what he'd destroy. Since Kanaha is still standing and Danzo hasn't been turned into mincemeat just yet, though, Genma's going to assume the kid means someone else entirely. I can get Fu out, he says quietly. And you too. Sai and Shin aren't going to have to fight anymore. Don't you want something like that? Danzo-sama, Genma snorts. Danzo-sama isn't going to be around much longer, kid. The Hokage will see to that, and if he doesn't, I will. Danzo might be more powerful than him, might be older and wiser and more experienced, but poison, Genma has come to find, is the great equalizer, and even Danzo can't check every last thing he comes into contact with. Genma's poisons are the best in Fire Country, and he's got motivation on his side. There's no way Danzo is getting out of this unscathed. Another long, breathless hesitation, and the boy takes a breath. Danzo-sama will just take more of us, he says, and it's full of something like grief. Genma recognizes that tone all too well. We can keep them safe, he says gently, crouching down so he's closer to eye level with the kid. Whoever you're protecting, I give you my word as a Konoha shinobi, they won't be harmed. The boy stares at him, weighty and weighing, for a long moment, and then nods. He reaches up and carefully pulls his mask off to look Genma in the eye. I am Abarame Torune, he offers like it's a choice, and Genma knows that it is. Danzo-sama would have taken Shino if I hadn't volunteered to go with him. Shino. Abarame Shino? As in Shibi's son? Gods, but what has Danzo been doing? Genma shoves down the outrage, the anger, and rises to his feet, slipping his senbon away. You should come with me, he says. If you want, I can go back and get Fu, but if you think he can wait a day, that might be safer for everyone. Fu is one of the most promising trainees, Torune says. He pulls his gloves back on, then his mask, and adds, he is on a mission for Danzo-sama right now. That gives Genma time, at least. He'd have gone back to the root base if Torune had wanted him to, but he wouldn't have done it happily so close to his last break-in. Better to give things time to settle down again, and then hit. Maybe with backup. Actually, definitely with backup. Aoba could probably be convinced to assist, even if the Hokage refuses to let them go. As a career interrogator, he's probably in the best position to deal with long-term conditioning anyway. Are there any other squads out here? He asks, even as one part of his brain is busy plotting a route back into the base. That tunnel Kurama mentioned, that has to be connected, given its proximity, and he doubts it will be well guarded. Maybe Tenzo could help them find an entrance or create one. Torune shakes his head. Not in this direction. Fantastic. Genma picks up a loping run, the kid right behind him, and maybe it's stupid trusting that he's thrown off his conditioning so easy, but kids are resilient. Genma knows that as well as anyone, and beyond that, Torune has someone to protect. 2 people even. That speaks to still having a will of his own, and he obviously hasn't had all of the emotion drilled out of him yet. Genma's willing to take the chance. They don't meet anyone else as they slip out of the forest near Training Ground 9. The buildings of the village proper start just a few yards on, and Genma leads Torune through the twisting back streets until anyone not familiar with them would be lost and turned around regardless of their sense of direction. He's betting on the root members not getting a lot of time in Kanaha itself since Danzo's trying to keep them hidden, and since no one seems to be following them, it looks like it's paying off. Are there safe houses in this area? Torune asks a little warily when Genma pauses, checking the street in all directions. Something like that, Genma says wryly, and before Torune can ask anything else, he leaps up the side of the apartment building using the branches of a willow growing off the edge of someone's balcony for cover. The windows on the 5th floor are all tightly closed and locked with the curtains mostly drawn the way he expected, so he perches on the sill beside Raido's hyacinths and raps his knuckles lightly against the glass. It's the same rhythm he and Raido used to use on the guard platoon, and Iwashi is the only other person who knows it. There's a pause, a flicker of chakra as the traps on the window are deactivated, and then the curtain pulls away. Raido looks him over, and Genma grins lazily and flashes him a victory sign. Rolling his eyes pointedly, Raido drags the window open, letting Genma slide through. As soon as his feet hit the floor, he turns and waves Torune in, and the boy follows him quickly. I take it this wasn't just reconnaissance, Raido asks dryly. Genma laughs, freeing his hair from its tie and pulling his mask off. What can I say? It's the rebel in me. Can never stick to a plan. Kushina's influence, Raido informs him, and when Genma grins crookedly at him, because that's the very furthest thing from an insult, he steps forward, dragging Genma into a tight hug. Damn it, Gen, they came in the window and told me you were playing distraction. I about had a heart attack. Sorry, Rai. Genma leans in, resting their foreheads together, and breathes out all of the tension that's been gathering in his spine. It was pretty bad. Raido pointedly doesn't call him on the clear understatement, just pulls back enough to kiss Genma on the forehead. Then he turns to Torune with a friendly smile, because Raido is quite literally perfect in every way that matters. And you'd be another rescue then? Torune blinks at him as if he can't quite parse the question, and glances at Genma with confusion. Aburame Torune, Genma tells his partner and watches his eyes narrow in understanding. At Raido's sharp look, he nods briefly. Danzo tried to take the Abarabe clan's heir, and Torune volunteered to take his place. Comprehension is quickly followed by horror. Raido comes from an established clan, and while it's small, it's still large enough to have all the weight of tradition behind it. Taking a family's heir is like taking their future. It's not the kind of thing that can be forgiven. Shino wouldn't have done well en route, Torune says like that's explanation enough. He needs to make friends, not isolate himself. Root, Raido repeats, and Genma can see him adding the pieces together. A pause as he takes a careful breath, and then he nods. Shin and Sai are in the spare bedroom, he tells Guy before glancing back at Torune. Would you like something to eat? Tea. Torune looks like he can't quite figure out how to react to the offer, and Genma carefully slips away before the urge to break something, preferably Danzo's face, gets too strong. He pauses in the doorway of their spare room, getting his slow-burning temper under control, and then knocks softly. Shin? Sai? He calls. There's a scuffle, and then the door is yanked open with surprising speed. You're all right, Shin says with poorly hidden relief, and Sai, poking his head around the older boy, offers Genma something that's almost a normal smile. It's a good effort, though, and Genma returns it, propping his shoulder against the doorframe. Settling in okay, he asks. I'll talk to the Hokage in the morning. Well, later today, I guess. Shin nods seriously, glancing back at Sai for a moment before meeting Genma's eyes. We haven't finished training, so we don't have seals yet, he says. We can tell you anything we know. We only get seals when we start being sent on missions, Sai asks and sticks his tongue out as if presenting evidence. Seals on their tongues to bind them. How logical, Genma thinks, and it's cold, dark, deadly, the same way he might calculate a dose of poison for a family he was sent to assassinate. He takes a breath, perfectly steady, because he can't allow himself to lose an ounce of composure, or he'll risk losing all of it, and asks, There any chance you know what mission Danzo wanted you for? Sai and Shin trade glances. Shin shakes his head, but before he can say anything, Sai offers, I think it was an infiltration mission in the village. Genma's not that much of a gambler, but if Danzo was pushing their training up, if he specifically wanted children for it, what are the odds that it wasn't Kurama he was targeting? Iruka's hands are shaking. He's sweating, almost trembling, his heart pounding in his chest and breath coming too short and fast, but he pushes on anyway. One step after another, the stones of the path scattering in front of his feet as he tries to turn his nervous shuffle into a stride. There's a house at the end of the long curving path, the roof just barely visible through the trees. Old, a little weather-worn, in need of a good amount of cleaning, judging by the state of the exterior and the overgrown garden, and Iruka keeps focusing on the details so he doesn't have to think about why he's here. Naruto is in that house. Naruto and his mother and 8 other Jinchuriki, just like the demon fox, to kill his parents. Gods, but this is the very last thing he wants to do, and he's doing it anyway! Marcus for bravery, His yearning instructor used to tell him, rolling her eyes, "I just wish you could tell when it was stupidity." Iruka hadn't been offended because he'd wished so too. Rushing in without thinking about things was pretty much all he did as a Ganin, and the only way he made Chunin was learning how to stop and think. He's not thinking now, though, or at least he's not thinking about stopping, and that's probably about the same thing. He can't stop, though, not really. The whole time Naruto was gone, he felt sick to his stomach, nauseous and uncertain, and so unbearably guilty because he meant to be friendly to the boy, was trying to work up the courage, but he hadn't managed it. And then Naruto was gone and possibly never coming back, and Iruka had sat in his bedroom and stared at his shaking hands and hated himself for feeling the way he had. Because a 6-year-old boy was alone with a man who kidnapped him, and all of Sarutobi and Genma's assurances that Kurama was a good person just weren't enough! So Iruka has to see Naruto with his own eyes, has to meet Kurama and the other children before he'll be able to even vaguely relax, but that's a lot of destructive force contained inside 4 children. A bare branch cherry tree is the last barrier between Iruka and the house, and he wants to hide behind it, hesitate and wait and linger until this insane idea just goes away. He doesn't, though. One deep breath and he steps forward and... laughter. A woman's laughter, loud and bright and unconstrained, undercut by the sound of children laughing too. A little girl shouts and a boy shouts back, and the lower voice of a man snaps something toasty. Another man laughs deeper than the first, and the woman calls something Iruka can't quite make out. He steps around the screen of trees, looking for the source of the noise, and then heads toward the back of the house, bright and lit with morning sun. He's just poking his head around when someone yells, "Back!" Months of teaching young children to throw pointy objects has Iruka flattening himself to the ground before the speaker has even finished the word. Something sails over his head, and Iruka automatically twists to watch it land. Whatever it is, it looks sticky, and when it hits the ground, it splatters with an unnerving squelch, casting ridiculous amounts of glitter into the air. Iruka blinks at it for a moment, then rolls to his feet and looks in the direction it came from. "Sorry," a little girl with green hair says, bouncing up to him. There's a teenager behind her, Iruka's age, with pretty amber eyes and dark hair, and he gives Iruka a faintly sheepish smile. "We thought it would be a safe spot to test it," he says apologetically. "Test?" Iruka repeats, glancing back at the oozing glitter bomb. If he's not entirely mistaken, it's currently eating into the ground like acid. The green-haired girl beams. "For a practical joke," she says brightly. "Kushinani is teaching us, but Utakata made acid, not his sticky stuff, so we have to try again." The teenager sighs, though he looks faintly embarrassed. "I told you, Saiken was too busy laughing to listen to me. We might want to wait." "Aww." With a pout that's at dangerous levels of cute, the girl wraps her arms around his elbow, hanging off his arm like he's a jungle gym. "We need to try again, though. I want to get my grandfather with it." She's about to add more when someone yells, and she twists around, leaps away, and bolts back around the corner of the house. The teenager rolls his eyes, but offers Iruka an apologetic smile. "I'm sorry about that. Food can be a bit overwhelming." Honestly, the acid still cheerfully eating its way into the ground is the overwhelming part, but Iruka smiles back anyway. "It's not a problem," he says. "At least there's only one of her. I teach a class with almost 20. Amber eyes widen as the boy blanches faintly. "I can't even imagine," he admits, and then inclines his head politely. "Utakata of Kiri." "Umi no Iruka." Iruka returns, a little abashed that he forgot to introduce himself so completely. Then the name registers and he feels himself go cold as he jerks back a step. The Rokubi's Jinchuriki?" For one fraction of an instant, something like hurt flashes across Utakata's face, only to be quickly buried by a mask of polite calm. "Yes. Forgive me for not mentioning it sooner. I forgot. But something an awful lot like guilt is churning in Iruka's stomach, as potent as the acid in the test glitter bomb. He steps forward again, reaching out, and can't manage anything except, "No, wait, I'm sorry. It was just a surprise. I forgot." Gods, but isn't that a heartbreaking thing when he thinks about it? A house full of Jinchuriki who don't have to hide from each other, who don't have other people look at them with fear, and maybe Iruka doesn't know what that's like, but he does understand loneliness. He knows the feeling of standing apart while everyone else walks together, and he doesn't want anyone to feel that way, regardless of who or what they are. Thankfully, the warmth is rising in Utakata's eyes again, and it's only with its return that Iruka realizes it had vanished completely. That's alright, he says, more gentle than Iruka has a right to. His fear has a reason, but that doesn't stop it from hurting other people, even so. It's so hard when the monsters from his nightmares are so very human. He needs to stop letting himself forget that. I came to see Naruto, if he's here, Iruka says, trying to salvage some of his composure. I was his teacher, and I didn't know if he was going to come back to class, but I wanted to make sure he knew he could. That earns him another faint smile from Utakata, though this one is several degrees happier than any of the previous ones. I'm glad, he answers and takes a step away. I think he's still playing with Gaara and Yugito, if you'll follow me. Iruka nods, falling into place with him as they head in the direction the girl disappeared. The silence is thick, and Iruka wonders how much of the awkwardness is his own projection. I really am sorry, he blurts when it finally feels like too much. It was just unexpected. Utakata doesn't look at him, tilts his head just slightly forward so that sleek dark hair falls to hide his face. A lot of people feel that way when they see us. We don't look like the Biju, and I think people are always surprised by that. Iruka winces because that's a little too accurate for comfort, and he feels like he owes Utakata an explanation beyond the usual. He owes it to Naruto as well, but he'll wait until the boy is older. That's far too much to drop on a 6-year-old's shoulders. Kyubi killed my parents during the attack, he says, and it's still so hard to get those words out to speak them evenly. This time, Utakata glances over at him, far too lovely to have a monster inside his soul. Though that's the point, Iruka supposes. There's no telling what's inside someone, and sometimes even if there is, it doesn't matter what they are in the face of who they are. Naruto and his aching loneliness have proved that to Iruka again and again. I've met old men with nothing to lose who are less brave than you've been in coming here, Utakata tells him, and it's something close to gentle again. Thank you. He quickens his pace, leaving Iruka gaping after him as he turns the corner. From around it, there's a tear, a yelp, and the thud of a body hitting the ground, and then a man snaps, "Damn it, Tomato, get off of me!" A woman laughs wickedly, "But Toto, you let the kids do it all the time." She's right, Kurama, the little girl from before chimes in. You've got to be fair. I have to do no such thing, the man snaps. Kurama, that's Naruto's uncle, Iruka thinks, and it's enough to draw him back into movement. As he hurries around the corner, though, he stops dead in surprise because Utakata is flat on his back on the ground, play struggling with Naruto and a little red-headed boy who was sitting on his stomach. The green-haired girl is sitting on the shoulder of the biggest man Iruka has ever seen, giggling while a blonde girl perches in the tree beside them. In the center of the lawn, a dark-skinned redhead is swiping at the familiar woman clinging to his back, expression set in an offended scowl as she laughs loudly. Well, I certainly didn't expect to see you here, Iruka. A voice draws from approximately 3 inches behind him, and Iruka yelps and jerks around to glare at just about the last person he expected to see here. Kakashi, don't do that, or I'm going to make you wear a bell! Kakashi's eye crinkles in an amused smile. How kinky! I suppose I can be convinced, Iruka very pointedly doesn't warn him that the pair of redheads are coming up behind him. He simply takes a step back as the woman gathers herself, Kurama supporting her feet to give her a steady platform, and flings herself at Kakashi like a spider monkey! He hears her whoop too late and goes down with a yelp, and Iruka takes several hasty steps back so as not to get caught in the crossfire. Smart, Kurama tells him dryly, joining him a safe distance from where the woman is grinding Kakashi's face into the grass. There's a pause, and Iruka glances over with some surprise to find Kurama watching him, expression thoughtful. Then, without any other hint as to his thoughts, he turns away and calls, Hey, kid, someone's here to see you. That, Iruka thinks a little dazedly. is not the reaction he expected to get from a possessive serial kidnapper with anger issues. But as Naruto leaves off harrying Utekata to beam excitedly at Iruka and bounce to his feet, he forgets the trepidation, the uncertainty. He smiles back because that's the only possible response and says, "I'm glad you're back, Naruto.